To the Future Napier Committee meeting. I have apologies from Councillor Taylor, which is moved by Councillor Crown, seconded by Councillor Tariha. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
I will do the call for any conflicts of interest. There being none, we do not have a public forum today. Your Worship, any further announcements from yourself? There being none. None from myself. I will make a call for any minor matters that are not on the agenda. There being none, I will pass over to Rachel for a management update.
Kia ora koutou. So at an earlier meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was a question around the fast-track consenting process and what is the impact of that for Napier City Council. So I thought I might just take the opportunity to overview what the fast-track consenting legislation or bill looks like. It is not yet legislation, so what I'm putting to you is just what's in the bill, but it might change. So in terms of impact to our consenting teams, there would be a low impact in that we would no longer be the consenting authority. How it works is, and you would have seen the list that's been published of those projects that are on the list, and for Napier, the two relevant ones are Ahuriri Station and the Hawke's Bay Expressway. How it works is a one-stop sort of shop for major infrastructure projects. These projects apply to the Infrastructure Minister and they are assessed against a criteria. And the Minister will convene an expert panel or independent expert panel. The applications must take into account any previous consenting decisions or any court decisions. Basically, the expert panel would then be made up of a convener who would be a former High Court or Environment Court judge, a lawyer or a planner as a chair, a representation from council, and I don't know what that looks like yet, an Environment Court expert. If the project deals with matters of treaty settlement, then it would involve a iwi authority representative, and there would be also on the panel expertise around Māori development and Te Ao Māori expertise. It is not a situation like you're used to in that there would be no public hearings and no public submissions. The panel would seek comment from those that are directly impacted by the project, and they would determine what that is. And that would also include the territorial authorities in which the project operates. The independent panel then can approve or decline the consent. The appeals process is very limited in terms of its scope. Is only for groups. The appeals process is only open to groups of interest or directly impacted. It's not open to the general public, and it's only about certain points of law. There is a judicial review process, of course, too, and that's possible, but it's only where the process may not be in line with the legislation and not about the merits of the decision. So that's a high-level summary of what we understand the bill to be at this point, and we foresee for the consenting team, and any of our technical staff, that there would be a lot of input into comments that we would make to those projects to the independent panel, but all of the work of consenting, including hearings and such like, would not be for us to do.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for covering off that action point. I'll just do a quick whip around the room to see if there's any questions for clarification on the fast-tracking bill. There being none, I'll move on. I'm happy to move from the chair the minutes of our future Napier committee meeting held on Thursday, the 12th of September. I have a seconder with Councillor Crystal, our deputy chair. Thank you, Councillor Crystal. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right, I will move on to our first agenda item, which is our project activity update for the City Strategy Directorate. So, Rachel, are you happy to introduce?
Yes, thank you. You've seen this update before. It is an opportunity for the City Strategy Directorate to give you an overview of the key projects and activities that we undertake. There is quite a wide range of things in the Directorate, so I think it's a really good opportunity for you to hear from those who are running this work. So to start with, for the first three and the bullet points on page 5, we've got Civic Precinct, Emerson Street and Waka Hub, and we've got Darren and George. Hand over to them. Thanks.
Welcome.
Morana koto, councillors. I'll give you a brief update of where we are with the Civic Precinct project. I'll talk to 4 specific items that are currently underway. The one that's probably most visual to yourselves and the public, which is the enabling works in what was the Library Tower, the accommodation block for council. We have contracted that work. Central Demolition are currently underway doing the salvage strip out, which is essentially taking anything that can be recycled out of the building in the next couple of weeks before moving on to the asbestos elements of the building, which thankfully there aren't many, and then we'll start to see them do the hard strip out in the middle to late November. Just for a bit more information about what's being recycled, you'll recall that there's lots of nice remove paneling throughout the ceiling of the ground floor and the level 1 mezzanine. So far, I think 90% of what they've taken out can be reused and will be reused as part of the design for that tower block in front of the facing of all the lifts on the 5 floors. So that's going well. And the carpet that was in there, that's currently getting stacked in a very neat and tidy way. That will be going out to a carpet salvager who will then reuse it out in the community. So those things are 2 items that have quite substantial use for us and that will be reused. Also at the moment, there's the 2 kind of design processes. So the accommodation block is at the end of developed design around essentially the strengthening scheme to make sure that building reaches 90% of the new building standard, and that is progressing well. Tiaka, the library building, that is currently at detailed design, which we've spoken about before. That's when we really get to the refinements of the building, the different material choices, figuring out the whole of life costs of those materials, how they'll be maintained, and getting us ready for building consent drawings. The 4th element of the project, which has a bit more sensitivity around it, is the tender process for our main contractors who will actually build the Civic Precinct. We're currently in the requests of interest component of that. Because of the commercially sensitive nature of that, I can't go into too much detail, but what I will say is we received some outstanding submissions, that the people who have put their best foot forward in this, and there's a good balance of both local and national interest in this work, and that the panel were incredibly impressed by just the sheer breadth and understanding of the project. They've taken on the documentation, they've attended the briefings, and they've got really good insights and have reflected that back, which is good because that means that it's an exciting job, but that makes it a challenge for the panel to be able to recommend a shortlisted group to go through into the interactive period and then on to present a request for tender, which would be in sort of February, March of next year. But very encouraging to date so far that we've got a large amount of people tendering who all can do the work. There was no challenges that sometimes, say 2 years ago, you may actually struggle to get a breadth of organisations who can compete each other on an equal footing. But we've seen a very competitive, hungry, but competent market. Happy to take some questions on that.
Thank you very much, Darren. I'll open the questions on the first project, the Civic Precinct. It's a really good summary you've given us in the paper, Darren. We certainly feel well informed, I think, all the way along this one as well, so it's good to get a next update. All right, I think you are off the hook with questions. Well done. Thank you.
Oh, did you want any other questions on the other Emerson Street or Waka Hub?
Oh, right. So we're not going to speak specifically to Emerson Street or Waka Hub, but open that up for any questions off the paper as well. No, I think everyone's reasonably comfortable with the updates. Thank you very much, team. You're off the hook as well, George.
Thank you.
Right, so next on the list is moving from the bullets from Ahuriri Regional Park right down to climate action. We've got Paulina online. And while Paulina is presenting, Luke, would you like to, and Juriel, are you coming up? Great. Perhaps Juriel and Luke, you could come up to the table and Paulina can do her bits and then you're ready to go with yours. Hopefully she's coming online any minute.
Welcome, Paulina. I see you're off mute now.
Hi everyone, I'm not sure whether you can see me.
No, we cannot, but we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm sorry, apologies, I cannot be there. I was coming down with a cold today, so I didn't want to be close to anybody. Yes, the Ahuriri Regional Park, there hasn't been much progress to update. Really, we are waiting at the moment for our stormwater master plan to progress before we get into pick up the Ahuriri master plan development again. So nothing much to update on that one. Moving to the next one, the proposed district plan. We are heading for hearing soon, so that is very soon actually. And 2 weeks' time, we have our first set of hearings for the proposed district plan. That would be on the 4th to the 6th of November. And that would be the first of a series of hearing streams until July next year. So that is going really well. Officers are preparing now the Section 42 reports for all of those hearings, and some of those for the first hearing have been already published on the website. Just as a reminder, we have a hearing panel comprising 3 councillors and 2 independent commissioners, 1 independent chair and 1 independent commissioner. And we also have a Te Ao Maori commissioner who would sit on some hearings for the proposed district plan. Also, in relation to the district plan, we are progressing with the 3 variations and looking at notifying the significant natural areas potentially closer to the end of this year. And Juriel would have a paper later on in this agenda item, which she's going to talk a little bit more about the significant natural area. Are there any questions in relation to that?
No, I think you're good to carry on. Thank you, Paulina.
Thank you. The future development strategy, I have a really good update now. Yesterday we had the joint committee meeting together with our partner councils and Mana Whenua partners as well. The FDS was adopted to be released for public consultation and be recommended to each of the councillors to actually endorse that for public consultation. So the joint committee has recommended for that endorsement to go to the partner council now. So next steps is to schedule into our council meeting within November, and then release it to the public. So that's really positive outcome after the last pause we have with the FDS that can now progress, hopefully. In relation to the bylaw and policies, we have had a couple of workshops with yourselves, one on the gambling policy and one on freedom camping, and those are progressing well to be actually the gambling policy. We decided we're not going to go and consult with the public because we don't have to, but the freedom camping bylaw is in the process of getting ready to be notified. Look, you probably want to give an update on the fire control bylaw, so I'll just pass it on to you.
Thanks, Paulina. So as far as the fire control bylaw review goes, there's been some work been undertaken recently in reviewing that in light of recent legislative changes that have been made to the Fire and Emergency New Zealand Act. We've also recently met with Department of Conservation, Biodiversity, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Manahariri Trust and FENS, along with a couple of community groups that look after the dotterels and skinks along the coastline. So that piece of work is really a process we're working through, which I'll bring to Council in December with a report recommending which way we're going to go as far as whether we continue with that bylaw or we consider revoking it. At this point in time, I haven't got a position on it simply because we still need to go through that engagement process with those groups and get their feedback so we can feed into that report. But I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. There was a big event in Matariki, as you know, along the foreshore where a lot of fires were lit. And my own feelings set aside, are you actually consulting with the group that organised that as well?
Through the chair, yes, we are. That was both Regional Council, Napier City Council, Manahariri, and also loosely with the community groups looking after those local fauna.
Councillor McGrath.
Supplementary to that, a doc involved as well?
Through the chair, yes, they are.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to having that workshop. Thank you, Luke.
Paulina, did you want to, or Juriel, do you want to comment on climate action, coastal hazards, any of that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give a quick update on those work streams. So first one with the climate action, we are now working, the partner councils are working on a regional risk assessment that was directed by the joint committee to pursue that. We have engaged Urban Intelligence, that is the consultancy firm that is helping us putting this together. And we're getting ready to report on a draft regional risk assessment to the joint committee meeting in November. So that is progressing well, and you will hear again from us in probably November. In relation to the coastal hazards, there was a meeting on the 28th of August where the Hawke's Bay Regional Council received the coastal hazard strategy, along with a report from staff member noting the recommendation for funding principles. And now we're waiting to hear from Hawke's Bay Regional Council on the pathway for implementation of this strategy. So there's going to be another update potentially in December in relation to the coastal hazards strategy. Tsunami, I have a quick update on tsunami. There
Paulina,
was
we might
a
just,
new, yes,
we might just pause
Sorry?
there. We might just pause there. I've got a question, Councillor Brown.
Oh, not so much
Sure.
a question, but
Sorry.
just a comment on the Climate Action Joint Committee. I just sought to update the members in terms of where the committee landed with that decision. So the staff presented us with a process to do a in-depth risk assessment for Hawke's Bay, and that is what would be advisable for from a CEDAM perspective, from a planning perspective. But from a committee, in terms of a climate action, we kind of just needed a more of a risk assessment light, so not going into so much detail in order to get in to drive some of that initial climate action. So there's sort of, this is a truncated process to get a quick risk assessment for the region, but we just want to flag that there's other customers within our organisations that will be looking for something in more detail.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Paulina, back to you. Tsunami. All right, we might go straight into parking, and if Paulina joins us, we will loop back to that. Parking.
Yeah, look.
Luke.
So with respect to parking update, as you would be aware, recently we held a workshop around the parking strategy that we've been working on. We've since come away from that workshop with a little bit of further direction around revising the problem definition and looking at things like how we're addressing commuter parking, residential like inner city living and their parking demands, and also those of people visiting our retailers and businesses in the CBD. That's something that we are continuing to work on, and we will be bringing that back to Council for a further workshop in the new year. We've also had recent discussions with the Ahuriri and Taradale Business Associations, and there is a need for some future work in that regard also. So that will be something that we'll start to put into our work program for the new year. With regards to our parking fee increases that were implemented back in July, the beginning of July, we've noticed some really positive behaviours around those changes. We have noted that some feedback received from retailers is their customers are indicating it is easier to find parking at the moment, so there's been a higher turnover, which is great. They've also noticed that those people that were regularly using on-street parking for commuting purposes are now moving out to the periphery somewhat more than what they were, and also taking up some leased car parking spaces. Those leased numbers did, the wait list did drop at one point, however they quickly picked up again, and our wait list is still quite healthy. And with respect to the government's increase in parking infringement fees from 1 October, we did a joint comms with Hastings District Council, the extent of which is outlined in that report there, but it was quite extensive and was quite timely as far as making sure that the community were well informed in that regard. The Herschel Street parking upgrade is now underway. We've got the first stage of that being commenced, which is the retaining wall. That's expected to be finished in the new year, at which point then they'll start on the upgrading of the ground level and the increase of approximately 20 additional parking spaces in that Herschel Street parked area. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Thank you, Luke. I've got Councillor McGrath, followed by Mayor Wise.
Just through the chair. Luke, government changed the rules on disability parking as far as putting the fines up to $750. Do you have any information on how many tickets we may have given out or warnings since that was brought in?
Through the chair, I'm only aware of one infringement that has been issued for someone parking in a disability parking space. And other than that, I can find out if there have been additional infringements issued and come back to you.
Yeah, and I guess has that trended down or is it consistent?
I can't comment on that at this point. Sorry, through the chair, I can find out what the trend is previously, but given it's only been in for almost a month, it would be hard to sort of get a real clear picture on what the trend is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Fair enough.
Thank you, Mayor Wise.
Thank you, through the chair. In the same vein, the infringement fee revenue, who receives that?
Through the chair, the infringement from
the
parking fines?
these fines, the new increased ones, who actually receives that revenue?
So council receive a component of it, and also central government. There are fees that have to be paid to the court for filing, and that's also made up of that, or a component of that infringement.
So considering the government receive a component of that, did they make any contribution to the communication costs that we incurred to advise the community about it?
Through the chair, I won't comment on that.
I think it's asked in jest, that one. Councillor McGrath.
So can I just get some clarification on that? So if we issue a parking ticket and it's paid, does council get 100% of that, or is it only if it goes through the courts afterwards that the government gets a cut?
Through the chair, I would have to get the exact figures for you and come back to you.
Yeah, I think that we get a cut when the fine's paid, and then if it goes through the courts, like the fine hasn't been paid, it needs to go through the courts, we have to pay filing fees, but then we would also get a cut of that fee as well, if it's paid.
Councillor Simpson.
You through, Madam Chair, we've seen some positive reaction to the increased fines and movement of vehicles and things. Have we had any adverse reaction? People hate getting caught. More importantly, they hate paying a fine. Have we had any adverse reaction to the increased cost of the fine?
Through the chair, as far as feedback around the increased cost in fines, no, the parking officers haven't had any feedback provided in that regard. There has been some feedback provided with respect to the increase of our fees, just around the comms associated with that, and they're things that we've taken on board, and obviously we'll keep in mind for any future increase, and just ensuring that we really get out and proactively, communicate that to the residents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. I think parking is one of those topics that's really difficult to sometimes hit everyone's expectations on, and so I appreciate the work that's being done in terms of that parking strategy. And I'd like to think once we get into those workshops with councillors, we can start talking around some of those principle-based approaches as well that council would like to see. I think, one of those key misconceptions is that council is out to gain revenue from parking fines, and so it was really good to tease out that commentary around central government retaining a portion of those fines, and actually how it's not an income-generating activity for council as well is good to clarify. Are there any other questions, comments on the parking part of the paper? If there's not...
Just a comment.
Yes,
Just
Councillor
it's good
McGrath.
to see in the paper, thank you, through the chair, it's good to see in the paper that we are actually looking at more car parks there, because there's been a bit of misinformation around that. We're looking at squashing all the parks, so it's just great to see that if the need's there, we're taking care of the need. Thank you. Herschel Street.
Apologies, Councillor McGrath. Could you repeat the question?
It was just a comment.
Mawson. McGrath
It was
Mawson.
just a comment.
Thank you. Apologies. Having a side conversation. Councillor Bowe.
Just a question about car parking in like supermarket car parks and outside warehouse stationery and all those sorts of places. Those are privately owned, are they not? So we don't have any jurisdiction about issuing tickets or whatever, that's the landowner?
Through the chair, yes, they are privately operated, and they use private contractors for the purpose of issuing infringements.
So the amounts that are being charged, for the people in disability car parks inappropriately, in our car parks, they won't necessarily have that sort of jurisdiction in their supermarket car parks?
Yeah, through the chair, how we infringe, and that's all legislated. The way the private businesses infringe is also legislated, but that they are very separate. We have no influence over how they charge as far as when issuing tickets for people staying beyond their permitted timeframes.
Thank you, and just supplement if you don't mind. This imposition of $750 parking fine for inappropriate parking and disability, have we had any kind of precedent of this kind of interference, I'd say, from the government in terms of our own parking fees, how much we charge for infringements? Or is this a one-off, just the only thing that you know of that they have asked us to, or required us to collect?
Through the chair, the infringements that have been increased by the central government are our infringements that we issue. So they're one and the same. This is the first time they've increased them since 2004. So as far as precedent goes, no, I don't think there is a precedent. It's just that they have determined that the infringements have remained the same for the last 20 years, and they've determined that at this point they were increasing them by the amount they've indicated.
Thank you, Luke. And just to sort of provide an additional context, that those infringement levels have always been set by the government, and we deliver the enforcement of that. Is
And
how
give
that
them the money.
and give them a portion of the money. Correct. Are there any further comments on parking? If there's not, we don't have Bill with us today. Our next topic is the current economic development activities. Rachel, I think you speak to it.
So Bill couldn't be with us today, but this is the first time that we've included this economic update information into this report. And if you have questions around economic matters, I can take them away and ask Bill. But if you have any feedback on, whether this is the sort of information you'd like to see, is it useful, that sort of thing, I'd be really open to that as well.
Okay, thank you. And just that, I think, an open invitation if there's any feedback to feed that through to myself or Rachel for our next paper. That brings us to the end of our topics being presented. So I will just open up for any general comments or discussion. If there's none, I know we've tackled it as we've gone. I will ask for a mover for the paper. Moved by Councillor Crown, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Any further comments?
Thank you. Just briefly, Madam Chair. Great to have visibility on these projects and these work streams. I think they're all things that are of high interest to our community, and personally really appreciate the inclusion of the economic development update, and I'll provide my feedback directly to you, Rachel, so thanks for making that welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Crown. Councillor Mawson?
Yeah, just compliments to staff on a very comprehensive report and great delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no further comments, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right, we move on to item 2. We have Bruce, I think, joining us for our EPMO Project Management Officer update. Welcome, Bruce.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Welcome.
So I've been in the role for about 10 weeks now. I think there's a presentation that's supposed to be whipping up.
Okay.
Is it on here?
We have the presentation in our
Okay.
minutes.
Taken as
you'll-
read then?
Yep, so you're welcome just to
Talk through it.
move
Okay,
through it.
that's
Yep.
fine. So look, I've been in the role now for about 10 weeks, and I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know the organisation and also understand some of the challenges that we have with delivering projects consistently in the council. So the primary purpose of an EPMO is to help understand how we execute projects, making sure we're executing the right projects that are aligned to our strategic opportunities, and also making sure that we're delivering them consistently. So it's all about how we deliver projects in a way that is consistent, ongoing. Sorry, there's a bit of this. Sorry. Oh, yeah, it's on mine. Yeah. So I'll just chuck that in. Yeah. Cheers. Thank you. There we go.
Well done.
Thank you. So really, I like to, the mantra that I call for, like an EPMO, is deliver the right projects and deliver them in the right way. That's really the key reason for EPMOs. And you will see later in my presentation that this is something that is now happening across a lot of different councils as well. So whilst this is a new function for Napier City Council, you can see that a lot of councils are now starting to implement EPMOs. How will we operate? Well, we have what we finally call the central hub or the hub and spoke model. So typically EPMOs for larger organisations, they will have smaller PMOs. So in our case, we have an IT PMO, we have an infrastructure PMO, we have a program of work delivering strategic projects. And we also have what we call a PTAG or project community, which are a group of practitioners that have specialised experience across the organisation in various elements. So, there are people from IT, people from project, people from procurement. So a real good cross-section of people across Napier City Council who we can go to when we need to provide some changes and get their advice on how we can do things better. The implementation phase is in four, for the implementation of the EPMOs in 4 phases. So the first phase is the quick wins, and I'll touch on that shortly. Then we focus on the framework, so the project management methodology, change methodology. Then we look at how the portfolios are created, so that's where we work closely with the strategy team around how we look at the long-term planning and how the EPMO works into that. And then the phase 4 is really about building additional maturity. Quick win scope, so that is largely complete. So we, as a starter, we did a health check on 30 projects across the council, and what that identified was a number of findings that we wanted to take into the business improvement plan. We've implemented what's called a basic initiation process, or what I call in project terms a project brief. And essentially that is providing a framework for all people involved in a piece of work around starting up a project to actually get a clear understanding of the scope, likely costs, likely magnitude of the work that needs to be done, and really to ensure that it's done in a consistent way and that we can then take to ELT, and ELT can then make a discussion or make a decision on whether that project should approve, assuming it's aligned to our strategic objectives. The Business Improvement Initiatives Group, so I could go on for hours about this, but it's actually really quite kind of interesting. But really, there's a number of people across the business that really want to improve how we do things. But what we have done is we've kind of done them in isolation across different teams. The idea of this steering group is to bring all of that together. And the purpose of bringing that together then is so we've got governance, oversight, and decision-making abilities on those initiatives. So, for example, if we've got one initiative that may impact all of projects, then we need to understand what those impacts are. And then the last quick one was transitioning to the EPMO manager. So I now chair that meeting, and we had the last steering group earlier this week where we made some key decisions. The EPMO is across all parts of the business, and really the EPMO is kind of the glue of bringing a lot of the change that's going on together. So, for example, we are involved, we've been working closely with the Waters team around their pipeline development, and I think you've seen some of those dashboards in there. We're doing a review of the current tool set that we use. So there are challenges with some of the data in there, and we're working on cleansing that data. I've obviously recruited my team, and they start basically from next month, so we'll be at full complement by Christmas. And also, obviously, there's a large number of change initiatives that are coming our way, and so we're trying to get across understanding what those changes look like and pull together a bit of a heat map for the ELT. Collaboration. I'm involved in a lot of different initiatives and across the organisation. So the comms and engagement strategy development, where I'm involved in some workshops with Julia's team. Finance, we're looking at our existing general ledger and how we integrate the magic or the finance system into our portfolio reporting tool. We're doing an assessment of the digital change impacts. We're looking at the pipeline development for the infrastructure team, so I've been working closely with a couple of the people in that team around that. We've got a whole new procurement strategy being implemented, and we're working closely with the procurement team. Project risk, now not a lot of people like talking about that because it's not overly exciting, but I think risk is really, really important, and it's really key to ensure that we look at project risk appropriately and that we are actually making sure we implement the suitable mitigants to any of the risks that we identify. And then we're working closely with Steph Murphy around her role and how we feed into the LTP process. And my final slide really is just to indicate that actually there are a number of councils that are doing this, and I have my first meeting with them early next month, just around some of the ideas that they have around what they could do. So, for example, the Waikato District Council use the same project management toolset that we use, and they may have done a whole pile of work that I could easily pick up and reuse, so I'm planning to meet with them next week. So that's really just sort of a bit of an update. I'm happy to open the floor to any questions.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's great to see the progress, and you look like you've got some wins on the board already, so well done. I will open it up for questions. Councillor Greig.
Yes, through Madam Chair. A question about staffing. How many staff in total are required to run the EPMO?
Through the Chair, we've got a team of 4 people, including myself. And so just in terms, I know there was a question at one of the recent councils about how we could fund those. They were funded from existing vacancies within the organisation. And that 4 is about right for a council size as well. So comparing ourselves to Whakatane, for example, they are ahead in their business case 4 roles as well.
Thank you, Bruce. And I'll just ask Rachel if she can give some context onto where those roles have come from.
Yeah, just to confirm that the roles that we've established for the EPMO, the 4, including Bruce's role, have come from repurposing previous unused roles. So we've repurposed that funding to create the EPMO.
So have not increased overall staff numbers to accommodate.
Or headcount.
Yeah. Headcount, thank you. Are there any further questions? No, a really comprehensive presentation. Thank you, Bruce. It's given us a great steer for where you're currently at and what's coming. So look forward to your next update. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully I can present some really cool dashboards for you all to have a look at next time. That's the sexy part of EPMOs. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bruce. I have a mover from Councillor Brown and a seconder from Councillor Crown. Comment, Councillor Brown.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Fabulous presentation. As local representatives, project delivery is something that is very, very close to our community's hearts. And on a number of projects over the last, that we as governors have inquired about over the years, that sort of scoping, project initiation process has come up as a bit of a consistent hurdle. So it's fabulous that that got in there as one of your quick wins. Delivering the right projects in the right way, I'm sure that's music to everyone's ears and music to the community's ears. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Further comments, seconder, Councillor Brown.
Just very briefly, I think Councillor Brown has done a great job there. But I just wanted to pick up on the fact that we're kind of unsiloing or de-siloing the organisation, which I think has been something that as governors we've been really strong advocates for, which is amazing. And it's really lovely to have fresh eyes across our organisation. Really encouraged to hear about the attitude of our staff, that they are wanting this, that they are on board. So, yeah, thank you for sharing those insights as well, Bruce. It's quite exciting. Can't wait to see the dashboards.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crown. If there's no further speakers, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Thank you.
All right.
You can go now.
Yes, you're allowed to leave. We have item 3, which is our key account management framework. So we'll welcome Simon up to speak to this. Kia ora, Simon.
Tēnā koutou i ngā kaihautu o Te Kaunihiri o Ahuriri. Tuatahi mihi ana ahau mātou hoki ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohi, ko Simon Bradshaw ahau. I'm just here today to introduce the kaupapa of the key account management approach and process for information purposes only. I'm happy to take the report as read, and we'll just go through a brief summary, being conscious of time, of what was in that paper and some of those key points. So the key account management process is to engage and enable development within our rohi. It is constrained by the resources that we have available, so we can't engage through this process with every developer that we have here in the city, but we go through a prioritisation with different criteria that is set out in that key account management policy. We've received good positive feedback from some of our key accounts that we have currently engaged, and happy to take any questions or partai that people might have.
Kia ora, thank you. I will open it up for questions. We'll start with Councillor Crown.
Thank you. Kia ora, Simon. It's lovely to meet you. I'm particularly interested in your criteria. It all makes sense to me.
Yes.
But there is one point there around developments that may generate media or political interest. And I'm wondering, how do you assess it? Something that we have found challenging perhaps in the past has been officers have great technical knowledge and they come at projects from a particular perspective. And sometimes I think we feel as though that political lens is missed, and it's where, where we come in. So I'm wondering, is there space for governors to be included in your criteria or in the assessment process, or how are you managing that political aspect?
Yeah, no, great question. Through the chair, we do have sponsors from the ELT that support this, Rachel and Russell, and they elevate up through their spaces anything that is considered needed to talk to with governance. However, happy to take on board any recommendations that we can look into about involving some of the governance directly onto this key account space. We can do that anytime.
I understand that if there the level of regulatory issues involved in some of these things, that we would perhaps, we don't want to conflict anything or cause issue, but I did just want to highlight that this is this is something that's quite important to us.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. Through you, Madam Chair. I think if you have any projects that you think Russell and I should know about or you're worried about, then please feel free to let us know and we can put that into the criteria. It is sort of a multi-criteria approach that we would take, so we need to consider all of the other factors as well.
Thank you
and just
very
through the
much.
chair, I guess vice versa, we can do the same. If we think there's anything Rachel and Russell can elevate up, they will do so.
Thank you. And I think what's given me, just a comment from myself, a little bit of confidence in that is that if we think it may generate media or political interest, and that's one of your considerations, if you have, for instance, speaking as an elected member, it's quite a great tool for us to have to be able to offer people that might come to us wanting to discuss regulatory matters or process or things like that, to be able to funnel them through to you in this way if they are of an appropriate size to be considered. So I think what's given me a little bit of confidence is having that political interest in your criteria means that if you are getting referrals from elected members, then that assigns some weighting as well to your considerations, I imagine. Correct?
Correct.
Are there any further questions on the paper? It was really well put together. I think we've got a good overview of how you're working. Have you got any further comments you'd like to make?
No, nothing else from me.
Okay. If I don't have any more comments from elected members, I will ask for a mover for the officer's recommendation. Moved by Councillor Crystal, seconded by Councillor Crown. Would you like to make any comment, Councillor Crystal?
No.
Comfortable, Councillor Crown?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Love this. I see this as a way for us to activate being more proactive, more customer service focused, all that good stuff that I know our initially our development community benefit from in the first instance, but the ripple out of the benefit to our wider community as well, which is so darn important in this space. So congratulations to the team for pulling this together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crown. And I think this is one of the things that we are doing incredibly well. I know at pre-agenda it was shared some specific feedback from a specific developer around a specific key account manager, and I'm sure that that feedback comes in lots of forms as well. But it is really acknowledged and valued by the developers, and it is valued by your elected members as well. So thank you for putting the effort into this paper that you have. If there's no further speakers, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Now welcome Jeriel, who is going to come and talk to us around item 4, which is our policy approach for the ecosystems and Indigenous biodiversity chapter. I will remind the rest of our speakers that we are going to be succinct because we are running a little behind time. So appreciate your assistance with that. Thank you, Jeriel.
Wonderful. Kia ora, everyone. Yes, thank you. I will be succinct. So just a brief summary of what we've brought to you in the paper and in the workshops. So we've been talking about the ecosystems and Indigenous biodiversity in Napier for a long time, and a few weeks ago we brought to you a workshop where we discussed the approach that we're hoping to take, and the full details of the chapter will come at the time that it's being notified and goes through council. But just to give you a summary of what the outcome of the approach is, that we currently, as the legislation sits, we operate under two national directions. We've got the RMA and we've got the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. Both of those require that we protect the special biodiversity that we have, and the NPS gives us some certain mandates to protect them in a certain way. The approach that we're taking here is that we classify in a tiered approach. So it starts with the mapping, and so part of that mapping has to meet the requirements of the NPS, which is a higher threshold, meet Section 6, and we have to do what we can to avoid any damage to those sites. And the change that has come from the last time that we brought this paper to you, which would have been a few years ago now, is that the ecologist has reviewed some of our sites and made some changes based on the new national direction. So that includes the introduction of something called restoration sites. And so that's what we're trying to do with the two tiers, that we protect at a really high degree those things that do meet this higher threshold, and where there is more locally significant values, we protect it, but a little bit more with the intention of restoring to bring it up to that nationally significant level. So that's the key parts of the paper. The details will come down to how the rules are crafted, about what you'd need a consent for and what you might not need it for. But altogether, the purpose of this paper and the upcoming chapter are to really give the framework that our position as council is that we don't have a lot and we want to protect what we've got, but we also want to focus on building up the sites that we do have. So a key part of the changes in the mapping that will come when it's appropriate is that, as I noted, a lot of the sites the higher threshold sites do fall on what's become private land now. And so we do note that this does put restrictions on landowners and what they can and can't do, or what they might not be able to do on their property. And so it really is that balancing act about what can we enable through the national direction, and the NPS is very directive on what we allow and what we don't allow. And then on those sites that have now come to that lower threshold of a restoration site, that a lot of those have actually ended up on our land or other public land, and so that gives us a great means to actually really enable and enhance what we do have. And so that's the purpose of what we wanted to bring here, just that general policy direction with more details to come. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Jeriel. I'll open it up for questions on the paper. Councillor Gregg.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a question about areas of Indigenous biodiversity in Napier. How do we stack up nationally compared to other areas or cities in New Zealand?
We're very low, through the chair, we're very low. We're sitting at about 6%, and that's even in our ecological district, and that's even smaller within the urban district. It's like below 1%. So it's really significant for us to protect what we have. I don't know where in terms of ranking, but the threshold that had been set by national direction for what we should be aiming for is if you have a very low amount, you should be at 10% of the vegetation, and we're below that even, so yeah.
Lots of room for improvement.
Yes.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just wondering, throughout the paper, Jerry, you mentioned like we want to protect it from further loss. Just wondering, do you have any statistics on what loss we've had recently? As in, like, you know, obviously, in one sense, you kind of said we've got some encroaching on our land, and I appreciate with how plants and fauna are, they tend to sort of reproduce, and birds have played their part as well. Just wondering if there's any statistics that show we're actually losing more or what we've got.
Through the chair, I wouldn't have specific statistics on percentage, but I do know of the 32 sites that we had put in the draft, we've lost half of one, so that's one that we know about, and the rest would need to evaluate in terms of the ecological value. But just for a reference, out of the 32, one of the really large, significant ones has been degraded already.
Okay, so sorry, just further that, Jerry. So is that in recent years or is that from the past?
That's right, that's in recent years. That's since we notified the draft. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowe, followed by Councillor Brown.
Do you know, Jeriel, if any councils have used incentives to encourage private landowners to retain or start areas that encourage biodiversity?
Because this is quite a new piece of national direction, there haven't been actually a lot of councils that have implemented it as far as getting to that level, but we have been looking at incentive packages on what we can apply, and there's a few ways that we can go about it. So yeah, when we come to that place, that's a little bit more at the implementation level, because those incentives sit outside of the plan mostly, the district plan, but it is something that we're considering looking at other councils.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, kia ora. From a community perspective, and especially those who we're putting extra limitations on what they can and can't do with their land, I think it's really important that we present ourselves as positively as possible around our efforts in this land. Just really crucial that we avoid any form of hypocrisy, and that we should clearly, as landowners, convey how we're going to actively work not only to protect but enhance our biodiversity. Do we have a strategy or plan in place to improve this on our own land? And will this be available in time for the comms around this?
Yes, through the chair, that strategy and plan does fall outside of the scope of the chapter, but when in collaboration with the other directorates, the reserves team is notifying their draft reserve management plan, and that's actually where the rubber hits the road, and in that there are objectives about planting and Indigenous biodiversity. So that's one aspect of how we're communicating that where we own our land, where we've got reserves and which now might be classified at a higher threshold, there are some plans in place where the detail will come later, but the objectives are certainly there. In addition to that, this was written under the Hawke's Bay Biodiversity Strategy as well, which is set by Regional Council. So yeah, there are some things in place, mindful that they're outside of the scope of this, but certainly taking place in the next few months as well.
Can I just clarify timing on that? Which comes first in terms of what we can release to the public? Is it the...
Yeah, the timing that we've proposed so far is that this would come first, so that the protection comes first, in terms of we don't want to lose any more sites. That's where we've landed, and the draft is in a different process.
Okay.
Just to add to that, yeah, the draft reserves management plan is coming to council in the next week or two.
Oh, brilliant.
Thank you very much, Gerald. I think I'm not seeing any further questions on that. So do I have a mover for endorsing the policy approach? Moved by Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Brown. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
I think I've said enough. Yeah.
Thank you, Gerald. And I think it has been well threshed out in a number of workshops as well, so that you've, I'm picking up a general level of comfort from elected members. So if there's no one else who would like to speak to the motion, I will put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Kia ora, thank you.
All right, I'd like to welcome Nick, who is going to present to us our resource consent activity update. Kia ora, Nick.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this quick.
Thank you.
You may have noticed in the background section the figures are sort of jumping up and down with a reasonable decreases and increases. So we are going to start looking at if there's a better way to represent that data. So I ran a report from 1 January to 23 October 2023, and we'd received 224 applications last year in that time period. And I've run the same report for this year, and we've received 198 applications. So we're down about 26 applications. And I guess that doesn't give any comprehension around complexity. So an application could be a one lot into two, or it could be something like emission heights, or it could be a one into a couple of hundred.
Mm-hmm.
We granted a couple of consents which are on the list, so outlined there. And I've just added one of interest, being 231 Puketitri Road. So this is the Mission Hills Stage 2 development. It encompasses a large super lot of 10.89 hectare, and with a couple of uses potentially there, one being Somerset and the other just as a development pathway. And you would have seen in the Herald further information around Somerset. And then about 9 larger lots and a road. And so yeah, overall discretionary activity, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick. Where an application is made, so you mentioned the Somerset, is that use designated in the resource consent that would come? I'm just thinking we've had instances in the past where developers have said, say, I'll put a commercial node here, and then later on they've made a different decision, and the community have sort of said that or felt like councils, say, let them down by that not occurring on that developer's land. I'm just thinking along the similar lines for when a developer designates or tries to designate a particular purpose to land. How concrete is that?
In this case, they have left the door open. The application has been clearly structured that it's going to be for either Somerset or a future development lot. And I guess until we get a resource consent to subdivide or do something with that lot, we won't know what's going to happen. Yes, I guess it depends on the district plan framework, whether we have identified it as an area that is required to be commercial, for example. Like in the Mission Hills area, there is a small section for commercial development. And yeah, it is a little tricky to confirm, because people don't have to implement a resource consent. They could obtain it and not implement it. They could apply for a replacement consent to change things about it. But yeah, for this one, it is looking like it's going to be going to Somerset, but yeah, the option is left open.
Thank you, Nick. I thought that was a good opportunity to highlight maybe one of those misconceptions that council can control through a consenting process what is built in a certain area or of a certain designation. So yeah, thank you for that. I'll open it up if there's any questions on this or any of the other items in the report. I'm not seeing, thank you, many sort of rolling over, I guess, from last report as well. Thank you, Nick. So if that's the case, I'm happy to move from the chair that we note the report. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Price. I've got nothing further to say. Councillor
I've got nothing either.
Thank you. If there's no further speakers, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And we are on to our final paper, which is the late circulation one, the Hastings District and Napier City Council Joint Alcohol Policy Review. Stephen is coming to speak to us about this. Kia ora, Stephen.
Kia ora.
Okay. I'll pass over to Rachel because I think this may be your first time with us.
I would like to introduce Stephen Bockerink. He's our new team leader for our compliance team. And the compliance team is made up of our alcohol licensing and food health inspectors. John Reid is also one of those inspectors, and also our compliance officers. So we're really grateful to have Stephen with us. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rachel, and kia ora koutou. Yes, I'm Stephen. I'm the team leader for compliance, and with me is John from our team. We have an update around the local alcohol policy, which is a feature within the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. The paper asks for 3 approvals for us to commence a review of the local alcohol policy, which is a statutory requirement to be completed within 6 years of adoption of that paper, of the policy. So the policy was adopted in 2012. We're planning to review the local alcohol policy by August 2025. The paper recommends that we proceed with the review, that we do a local alcohol policy that's tailored to Napier City, and we do that within a joint governance structure with Hastings, so we can share some of the resources and some of the work that goes into producing the policy settings within a joint governance structure. 2 issues are outlined in the paper. Before I get to the issues, so the local alcohol policy is considered by licensing bodies when considering alcohol licenses. The policy can provide provisions for maximum trading hours, location of premises, things like one-way door policy after certain times, and other discretionary conditions. If council chooses to proceed with a local alcohol policy, then it must use its special consultative procedure for producing that. We also need to consider data from New Zealand Police, Health New Zealand, in forming that local alcohol policy. The local alcohol policy can't consider matters that aren't related to licensing. The local alcohol policies aren't mandatory for territorial authorities, but once adopted, they are obviously in place for licensing bodies to consider. The 2 issues we have outlined in the paper is obviously the statutory requirement to review coming up within a fairly short time frame, and also our preferred option around establishing a joint governance structure so that we can get regional consistency as best as possible and align communications so we can take a regional approach with colleagues in Hastings. Getting that position took some communications with Hastings, and they have an equivalent paper before their full council at 1 o'clock today. So thank you for Rachel for helping us coordinate and navigate that. So we're at the first stage of the review process, that is seeking approval to obviously continue with the policy, produce it as an individual policy for Napier within the joint governance structure for Hastings. We're aware of other important aspects around of the local alcohol policy, the need to minimise alcohol-related harm, engage meaningfully and coordinated with the community, in particular those that are disproportionately impacted by alcohol-related harms. And another item that you might be interested in is around the appeals process, which across governments previously delayed and led to some challenges to local alcohol policies. Some of those provisions around appeals have since been revoked, so that has enabled councils to form their local alcohol policy with to better meet the expectations of their communities as they've produced them. Our next step, if the preferred option is agreed with, is to establish a joint governance structure in terms of reference before considering research and evidence gathered to support council with provisions. So there'll be an evidence base which we're looking to put together around academic literature, but also from hospital emissions data and police alcohol-related harm data to inform the settings. Implications, we don't expect this to incur large fees that will be sourced from within the existing compliance budget. There may be a small amount of cost associated with legal review of the local alcohol policy and for administering the special consultative procedure. The risks are mainly around timelines, and as I said, the revocation of appeal has removed a barrier to a lot of councils considering local alcohol policies that reduce alcohol harm in their communities. We'll do this jointly within the joint alcohol strategy, which is also underway and forms part of an area of influence within regulation. So while this is a separate statutory requirement around local alcohol policies, it fits within the work that's underway to produce a cohesive approach to alcohol-related harm. So just quickly, the two options we considered was to take the joint alcohol policy and review it with Hastings, or individual local alcohol policies within a joint governance structure. I considered 4 criteria in putting this recommendation forward. The first one, alcohol-related harm reduction, we think is similar with a joint or an individual policy provision for Napier. We think the main benefits are around process efficiency, financial considerations, and with the joint governance structure having a regional approach to the settings, which will retain council's ability to autonomously develop the policy provisions within the local alcohol policy, but do that in a way that is coordinated across Hastings and Napier. If the recommended options agreed, then our next step will be to set up that joint governance structure and terms of reference before considering the evidence for the policy. Happy to take questions through the chair.
Great, thank you very much for the summary. I'll open it up. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Just the joint governance structure, what happens if in the gathering of evidence or hearing the community in our 2 respective cities, different hours of trade, for example, between the cities are the recommendation or what the community wants? Do you imagine that we could end up with 2 LAPs with different hours of trade, for example?
Yeah, so ideally around hours of trade, we will want to, as best, mirror the policies between, but either option allows for differences depending on council's position there. So some areas have joint alcohol policies with different areas with different trading hours. So as best as possible, through that joint governance process, we're looking to coordinate and align as much as possible while retaining autonomy for council to decide what those maximum trading hours should be.
And just a supplementary question, do you envisage there'll be hearings so the community can come and have their say?
Yes, definitely. As part of the special consultative procedure that's developed, we expect that there will be opportunity. That's step 6 in our engagement and hearings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Is there a mechanism to cover a stalemate? And I go back to the original lap, and Hastings wanted 2 o'clock closing, Napier wanted 3 o'clock closing, and there was a little bit of a battle went on, and I think the Mayor of Hastings might have pushed it to come with what Napier wanted. Is there a mechanism there that can handle that situation? Because it is a chance.
Yeah, I think that'll be something that we'll need to tease out in the terms of reference, and I'm looking at Rachel there around how that joint governance structure will work. I imagine there could be an opportunity for that. We'll try and resolve that as the process develops. But Rachel,
through you, Madam Chair, I agree. I think you're highlighting that there is a risk, and the terms of reference will help, there still remains a risk. But both councils are fully committed to reducing alcohol harm as its primary effect. So if there was differences between policies that, in any way contributed to alcohol harm, then that would be against the provisions of the Act. I also think that under the joint LAP, there was also options for there to be differences, city to city, and that was there already, and it remains. It would be the same with individuals, but with the joint governance structure, I think we can mitigate through a lot of that. Yeah.
Happy, Councillor Price?
Well, in theory, it sounds pretty good. In practice, I can tell you it won't be quite as easy because we had a big battle. You were in council then, weren't you, Max? It wasn't just sorted out overnight. And it is, the cities are so close that if one bar's open an hour longer than another, people will travel.
Yeah.
And so you create a whole lot of travelling between bars. But I'm happy where we're at.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you're saying. And
it.
It's definitely a risk that we were concerned about, and that's why when Hastings first proposed to go with individual LAPs, we had to turn their mind to this sort of risk. But I do think that the police and Ministry of Health, or the DHB, sorry, will also have to comment on these LAPs. So if they perceive there to be issues and differences, then they will make comments as well.
Okay, I'm looking around the room and I'm not seeing any further questions on the staff recommendations. Got a level of comfort I'm picking up from probably the two most experienced councillors in this space, acknowledging some challenges. And perhaps I think a conversation as we're developing that terms of reference could be a good touch point as well with those councillors who've been involved. Councillor Bogue?
Just getting back to Rachel's comment about, did Hastings initiate the suggestion of having separate LAPs?
Yes, and
so you don't have a choice.
And their council meeting is today as well,
okay.
And their officers are recommending this approach.
Right.
If they adopt the individual LAP approach and you decided to remain with a joint, then their decision would stand and they could proceed with an individual.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, so Councillor Brown? Okay, I have a mover in Councillor Bogue, but if you're happy to be seconded?
Yep.
Okay. So we have the officers' recommendations moved. Councillor Bogue, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, and just if you would bear with me for a couple of minutes, just for those of you who weren't around when we did our last LAP, just a bit of background and what the difference is this time, a very positive difference. So since 2012, every local council has been able to develop their own local alcohol policy, deciding things like trading hours for licensed and unlicensed premises, and or off-licensed premises, bottle stores, supermarkets, etc., when they could sell alcohol. And of course, the whole idea was to reduce alcohol harm, and the police, the DHB, and the community all had an input into those. Unfortunately, though, up until last year, the alcohol industry, in particular the supermarket duopoly, were able to appeal the hours of trade or whatever it was we had in our LAP, and we had the prospect of costly legal action if they thought the hours of trade did not suit their business and were too restrictive. So as a result, many councils didn't develop an LAP, so they stuck with the one that was included in the original legislation, which was from that off-licence stores could be open and trade from 7 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. at night, and on-licence from 8 a.m. till 4 a.m. So they're very, very wide hours. So our purpose of the LAP was to restrict those hours and make them more conducive to what our community actually asked us for. Some of the biggest cities in New Zealand didn't develop an LAP because of this threat of having to fight the alcohol industry with their very deep pockets. And in fact, Christchurch gave up after spending $1 million fighting the industry. Hamilton, 200,000, the far north the same. And Wellington and Auckland didn't get an LAP at all because they just couldn't face the potential costs of the appeals. So for us, what happened here in Hawke's Bay with the two councils was it took 3 years to adopt our policy, our local alcohol policy. The supermarkets were not happy with what we wanted, and we ended up with a watered-down LAP, the one we have now. Supermarkets allowed to sell from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. In 2018, this council put a remit forward to the local government conference on this issue, which was passed, asking that the local government lobby the central government to make an amendment to the sale and supply of alcohol 2012 to ensure that LAPs are able to more accurately reflect local views and preferences. The legislation passed in 2023 did that, and it removed the ability for the industry to appeal, giving power back to councils to make decisions that were more in keeping with what their communities considered were appropriate and would best reduce alcohol-related harm. So I'm very happy to move this resolution, and it will be a very positive move for our community that we will be able to listen to them and the police and the DHB without worrying about the very expensive threat of an appeal. So I urge everybody to vote for it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bogue. I will open the floor first.
It seems like a win-win. There's efficiencies in the governance process, but the ability for us to retain localism in our decision-making.
Thank you. Any further speakers to the officer's recommendation? A complex one, but I think you've made it reasonably clear for us as well, and it's good to have that certainty from the Hastings side as well around those reasons why. So that being said, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that's the end of our meeting. I will ask us all to stand for our closing karakia.